You know what's strange? We talk endlessly about boomers and millennials. We dissect Gen Z like they're some fascinating new species. But there's this entire generation that just exists in the middle, barely mentioned, almost invisible. Generation X, born roughly between 1965 and 1980. They're your older coworkers who never complain, your parents who seem oddly detached sometimes. The people who built the internet but don't post about their breakfast. And here's what nobody tells you. Their psychology is probably the most misunderstood of any living generation. They were the first generation of latchkey kids on a massive scale. Picture this, it's 1978, you're 8 years old, and you come home to an empty house because both parents are working. No smartphone, no cameras, no way for anyone to check if you're okay. You let yourself in, make a snack, do homework alone, and wait. A study published in the American Journal of Orthopsychiatry found that by 1984, approximately 7 million children between ages 5 and 13 were regularly unsupervised after school. That's an entire generation learning. You can't always count on someone being there. Psychologically, this created what researchers call a high contingency environment. Actions and outcomes were directly linked without buffer time. Your brain learned to predict consequences in real time, which is why Gen X tends to think 3 steps ahead in ways that baffle younger generations. Gen X grew up watching their parents talk about stability, then rack up divorce rates through the 70s and 80s. They saw people give their all to companies only to get pink slips when layoffs hit. Everyone told them work hard, follow the rules, and life will work out. But then the rules just changed. Psychologists call it defensive pessimism. Gen X just calls it being realistic. They built emotional armor. They hope for good things but expect the rug to get pulled out, because that's what kept happening. That's why you barely hear them on social media. They grew up when privacy was normal. When you messed up as a kid, maybe a handful of people knew. No phones, no viral videos. The idea of blasting your life out for strangers doesn't feel exciting. It feels risky. It's about learning early that the less people know about you, the safer you are. Gen X basically turned irony into a shield. Crack a joke, keep things at arm's length, laugh it off before it stings. They grew up in the shadow of the Cold War when teachers talked about nuclear war like it was just another rainy day. But here's what's fascinating. Despite all this, Gen X developed a distinctive work ethic. They don't talk about it, they just do it. This was forged through jobs that seem archaic now. Paper routes at 5 in the morning, bagging groceries, working registers where you calculated change in your head. These weren't resume builders. They were raw introductions to the adult world. They watched their parents get destroyed by corporate restructuring, so they never believed in company loyalty, but they're fiercely loyal to their own competence. They can't control whether they'll get laid off, but they can control whether they're the most valuable person in the room when it happens. There's this weird paradox at the core of Gen X psychology. They're simultaneously the most independent generation and the most quietly collaborative. They'll never ask for help. Figure it out themselves. Been doing that since they were 8. But if you need help, they'll show up without drama, without posting about it. They respect competence, not titles. If you've earned your position through actual skill, they'll follow you anywhere. If you're just someone with a fancy job title who doesn't know what you're doing, they have zero patience. Gen X questions authority because they watched incompetent authority figures make terrible decisions their entire childhood. They faced serious economic headwinds. The youngest graduated into the dot-com bubble burst. The oldest were hitting their stride when 2008 hit. They've been economically traumatized repeatedly, which is why they're more likely to have multiple income streams, not because they're entrepreneurial, but because they learned nothing lasts. Research in the Journal of Adult Development shows Gen Xers report lower levels of seeking social support during stress. Not because they don't have people to ask, but because asking feels like admitting defeat. Before the internet, knowledge had weight. Gen X spent hours in libraries hunting through card catalogs for a single book. Information had a physical cost. Cognitive psychologists describe this as deeper encoding. Information that requires effort to obtain becomes more permanently integrated into memory. They learned to fix things with their hands. When your bike chain slipped, you didn't call a technician. You flipped it upside down, got grease on your hands and figured it out. This built mechanical intuition. Now they're watching their kids grow up with helicopter parents and constant supervision and social media documenting everything. They gave their kids the attention they never had, But sometimes they worry they've made them too soft, too visible. Because in the Gen X worldview, being visible means being vulnerable. Generation X might be the last generation that truly understands what it means to be alone with your thoughts, to be bored, to solve problems without Googling the answer. They're not better than other generations, just different, shaped by a unique moment in history when the old world was dying and the new one hadn't been born. They're the bridge generation, and bridges don't get much attention. They're just there doing the work, holding things together, expecting nothing in return. And maybe that's the most Gen X thing of all, not caring if anyone notices,